Ayo, what's good? This is my movie review for Champs, which came out earlier this year. This movie got was kind of under the radar. It didn't really get much publicity. I know it was like in theaters for a while, but once I heard about it, it was already out. It wasn't in theaters anymore, and I don't think it was in theaters in any of my local theaters where I go. So must have been in like select theaters. This movie traces the life and careers of Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, and Bernard Hopkins. And it this movie is not like just biographical. It traces their careers very selectively. Only doesn't say their whole life or their whole careers because, of course, there's a lot to cover in these three men's legendary careers. But it traces their careers and their life with the theme of the American dream. How these three came from poverty. Tyson from New York, of course, Brownsville. Holyfield from Alabama, and Bernard Hopkins from the north of Philadelphia. And how these three overcame their obstacles of poverty in each different ways. And it's very interesting because um, Tyson and Holyfield, yeah, their careers cross paths and their lives cross paths, but it's very interesting they how during those years their progression is different each man. So it starts by saying how each man, of course, they all grew up in poverty, and then how they each started getting into boxing, and how Tyson. But a lot of this, if we follow boxing and we're a fan of boxing documentaries, boxing movies, we know a lot about this stuff. But it's a good recap. Like Tyson was poor, he joined the. It's funny because he's like, man, I wouldn't go to school because the kids would beat my ass. So he joined a crew, got in trouble breaking into houses and all that, and he found boxing in prison. At Holyfield, found boxing in a boys club in Alabama, and this first fight, it's interesting because his first fight, he he lost. Like he got whooped by a white boy, and he's like, man, they lied. I thought white boys couldn't fight. That's what he was always told, but wasn't true. Um, so he went back home, and he's like, Mom, I got my I got beat up. I quit, and that's when his mom told him something he never forget. He's like, life doesn't always go the way you want it to go. So that's basically the foundation of the great warrior that is Holyfield. Like he lost and he wanted to quit, but never again. Like that was the attitude he had. Sometimes it doesn't go the way you want it to go, which propelled him to one of the greatest careers of all time. And Bernard Hopkins grew up in a home with both his parents, but he was still grew up in the ghetto, not going to school, instead hanging around school, trying to do his stuff. Got a reputation as a tough guy. Got stabbed multiple times. He said every time he got stabbed, that his reputation grew. So when he went to prison, he had 9 felonies. 9 felonies, guys. Here in Cali, he would have got life. 3 strikes you're out here in Cali. But he got 9 felonies, and that around that same time his brother got shot and killed. So he was allowed to come out and see his brother's funeral, and he just looked at his mom, and it just he felt sad because he said his mom basically lost 2 kids in that night because he was in prison and his other brother had died. And in prison, this is where he found boxing. It's interesting because 1984 marked a significant year for the three of their lives. Mike Tyson and Holyfield have gone through the amateur ranks. Holyfield made the Olympics. Mike Tyson didn't. He lost to Tillis, I believe, in the Olympic trials. So he was a substitute or an alternate Olympic alternate. So he did go to the Olympics, and Holyfield went to the Olympics and he performed in them. He won the silver medal, in which he got robbed by disqualification. A very disappointing moment, because I did not know this actually. He knocked this guy out, he knocked him down, and by the time he got off, the referee had called it off. Everybody thought he knocked him out, but it turns out that the referee had yelled stop, and at that moment Holyfield launched that left hook that dropped his opponent, and he got robbed. He basically got robbed. It made headlines and everything. So, but by the way he acted humbly. He didn't make a fit. He came out as like famous or mostly recognized for that, for being robbed, and the way he acted after that fight, after the Olympics. And Mike Tyson was off with nothing, having to make his own reputation, which he did. Bernard Hopkins went to prison. He says like prison is, of course we know, is one of the toughest environments, because in the streets, he says, you could hide, you could go to your house, but in prison you're stuck with these people every single day of your life. You're stuck with them. So he started, they say like the worst thing about prison is the boredom, and he says it's you have pent up anger, pent up energy. What are you gonna do? You're gonna use them on guards and on your fellow inmates. You're gonna do something negative. But he propelled prison into something positive. He rehabilitated in prison through boxing. He started doing boxing. Yes, he had a few amateur fights and he was very good. He had the skill before he went to prison, but in prison he found the love for it once again. And that's when he started beating everybody. They had prison tournaments, and he became the state champion for Pennsylvania, beating people from Philly, from Pittsburgh, and all over the place. He became the champion. And after 5 years, he was out. He was able to get out of prison, and he was like he started a new wing, of course, in his life, and became pro. Mike Tyson, Holyfield, Mike Tyson just knocking everybody out. Holyfield always wanted to be heavyweight champion, but he started on cruiserweight, and back in the day it was called junior heavyweight, and that's when he won the title against Qawi, Dwight Muhammad Qawi, in that brutal fight, beautiful fight. They put a few highlights of that fight in this documentary, which was so cool. That fight's so good. And around that same time when Mike Tyson won his title from Trevor Burbick. So now Holyfield was in Mike Tyson's shadow, because as he put it, who put it? I think it was Al Bernstein. He put it, he said, being the cruiserweight champion is like being vice president. No one really pays attention to you. So he was always in Mike Tyson's shadow. But Mike Tyson had the lifestyle and all the women and all these dirty promoters. That's another thing that was emphasized in this film. Boxing is a beautiful sport in its essence, but the business of boxing is dirty. There's always people around there trying to make money, trying to screw the actual people that are boxing. They trying to screw the people. So boxing in its purest essence is a beautiful thing, but the business of boxing is dirty, is one of the dirtiest business of all. So Mike Tyson surrounded himself by leeches, and we probably know his story already. And this is when he fought Buster Douglas, and Holyfield was there. He was there in Japan. Mike Tyson didn't even want to be in Japan, but he had to go. He wasn't really training. They showed a footage that he was there messing around with some sumo wrestlers. So he went into the fight. Greatest upset in sports history. Holyfield was there like, damn, dude. He knocked out Mike Tyson. So Holyfield got that title shot, his first title his first shot at the heavyweight crown against Buster Douglas, knocked him out in like 2 rounds, I believe. Um, but people still disrespected him. People still said that he wasn't the real champion he because he didn't beat Mike Tyson. So he never really got the respect until he fought Mike Tyson, which was after years because Mike Tyson lost to Buster Douglas, and then he had that stint in prison where he was accused of rape from Desiree Washington, which he did not do, by the way. He went to prison for about 5 years, 4 or 5 years, until after that. It kind of skips throughout all these much of that because a lot of that, as the general boxing fans know. So it kind of skips through that, goes through his fight with Holyfield, and he was the heavy underdog. It said like how it was portrayed as good versus evil. Mike Tyson was the evil man accused of rape and all this, being his actions being wild, but Holyfield's like, man, I'm a great fighter. How could they be against me that bad? He said Mike Tyson never spoke bad against me, but it was the media. The media makes hate amongst people. So I think that's why maybe Mike Tyson and Holyfield might have hated each other for so long, because the media put them against each other for so long. Like, Holyfield wanted to beat Mike Tyson so bad because in his book, he actually says that media were saying that he was going to die. That he was going to die in that fight. And then the bite fight occurs. They didn't go much into that, except, like, dude, Mike Tyson was like a pit bull, man. All these people, and like all the negativity surrounding him, all these people, all these Don King, all these women, it was just too much. Like, how could you come from nothing, be so poor, and just have all this money, that he just didn't know how to handle that. And he traces, where does it go next? Hopkins' careers, how he became a great fighter after that. It really doesn't go in much detail of Hopkins' career. Just says that he won the middleweight championship and he made 20 defenses, of course. A lot of us know this. Then it goes into how these men went broke after their late in their career. They went broke, and how Mike Tyson got knocked out a few times after he was just fighting for money, and how Holyfield went broke and he lost his $24 million mansion. And this is where it goes from the American dream. Like, these guys coming from a poor background, like, they didn't know what to do with this money. Like, they were never taught what to do with their money, like how to handle life financially, how to handle life, basically, right? They were never taught that. They just went into boxing to fight. That's all they knew. That was their job, to fight. And that's what they did very well, better than anyone in the world. But you got these men boosting their egos, trying to take money off them. Mike Tyson said a great quote. He's like, man, tell me, if you could beat any man on earth, 6 billion people on earth, you could beat any one of them in a fair fight. Tell me that won't boost your ego. Mike Tyson's ego was boosted. Both of the egos were boosted, all of them. But they lost it all. Mike Tyson lost everything, repossessed, filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, Holyfield and Mike Tyson. But they lost everything because how was a poor man raised in Alabama, raised in Brownsville, on dirt floors, having to live in abandoned buildings at times? How are they going to handle this life of luxury? They're going to spend it. They're going to spend it well. And 50 Cent was in this. There was a lot of stars in this movie. 50 Cent, Mary J. Blige, Denzel Washington, Mark Wahlberg, Ron Howard, Mickey Ward, Al Bernstein. they all put some very good insight on this. 50 Cent said that these guys will rob people, like businessmen rob people worse than how they would rob him in the streets. Like he's like, at least in the streets, they rob me at gunpoint, and they take they take my money I have at me, but they rob me at gunpoint. In the business world, they rob you black and white. He says that in the business world, he's seen people robbed worse than in the streets. So that's the kind of environment that these men have to live in now. After being raised poor, after poverty, that's all they know. And Mike Tyson said you'd never recover from poverty. You always have that in your mind. And that's why so many fighters get screwed off their money, because they come from this environment and they don't know what to do with all this fucking money. And they don't have any support. They just surround themselves with leeches. So they need to change their environment. So after they all got broke and they're just talking about how the system needs to change, how there's no regulation, no governing body, and there needs to be a governing body around these, that boxers need to be guaranteed like a minimum. There's a governing body on in all sports, in the NFL and the NBA. There's a minimum, like 100-400 grand these guys get paid, but in boxing it's nothing. They were saying, Lou DiBella's in this too. He was saying how a main event on ESPN on Friday Night Fights gets 15 grand, and after all the fees, the referee, the paying the state and all that, he's left with like six grand, $6,000 just for him to pocket. So there definitely needs to be a system that regulates these guys' mental health and their financially, that helps fighters financially, because there's no regulation for that either. They got into brain trauma, how a boxer only needs one MRI to get his boxing license, and then they're never checked again. So very good film, very interesting. I really enjoyed the perspective that it had, instead of just following these guys' lives and what they do, because we know a lot of these guys' lives, especially like Mike Tyson. We know what they do, but it went in more into depth on the business side of boxing, tracing it with the American dream, how a lot of mostly great fighters are from poverty, but a lot of them end up broke as well. And there definitely needs to be a change in the system, because we love boxing, but I know most of the YTBC, we've said it, like, we hate the business of boxing and the people involved in making fights, because a lot of them are scum, just flat out. They're scum. They want to rob from the fighters, and Bernard Hopkins has been trying to do that for he was talking about it, how he wants to help the fighters, that they need to get their attorney, and they need to get an attorney. They need to get all these people to help them out, to help out their careers, and they need to be knowledgeable about business and the business of boxing and how to make money and how to save money. Like, they need to be knowledgeable on all these aspects. Tyson and Holyfield, it looks like they squash their beefs and they're happy. They're doing a lot of charity work. Holyfield is a Christian. He's done a lot of charity work for a lot of charities, and he's like, yeah, helping people is the maximum. And he actually invited Mike Tyson, and he has accepted. So they're both doing charity, and it looks like they're both in happy places in their lives. So out of the three right now, probably Hopkins is the most successful, the most money, and I recommend this. I recommend watching this documentary or this movie. At first, I was like, what could they say about these men's careers? And there was some new stuff about these men's careers that I did not know, that they went, into detail about, which I appreciated. But it's more like a call to action. What could we do, or what could the athletic commissions do to help fighters' careers? And there's a lot to be done. Thank you for watching, everybody. And what do you think about this movie? If you watched it, don't forget to subscribe. Peace.